Yeah, I had an okay day. I'm getting over this crud, whatever it is. But
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm feeling better though. Feeling much better.
Mrs. Deal is a great example. Walking up to a grocery basket to be in the face of an infant without parents' consent.
Yeah.
Without yeah, like what? Don't do that. That's weird. Another one that's very aggravating for people with a uterus is when they walk up to them and just touch and they're pregnant, they touch their belly without permission. I
Oh,
don't know why
God,
people do that.
that is so cringe.
I've been pregnant 3 times. I've never had anybody do that from what I can remember. So,
Well, that's
Good.
good.
Yeah, that's good.
but I live in Maine, so we're like a more low populated type of state, but they're definitely busing people in here like crazy right now. So we'll see how that works out.
What do you mean bussing people in? I have to
Wait, what do you
ask.
mean?
I'm sorry?
What do you mean by bussing people in? I have to ask.
No, they're just people that are coming into the country that are being brought up here into Maine. So, I mean, I don't know. We'll see how long the low population. Oh, and there are also a lot of people that come from like states like California and New York and Massachusetts and Texas. Well, not Texas, because that's, well, sometimes Texas, right, Chris? Yeah, there are some people that are coming up here just because it's like a quiet kind of lay low kind of community. And yeah.
Interesting. You think people? Well, I don't know why Californians are moving to Maine, but I'm sure that's.
Have you seen the state of a lot of their freaking major cities?
Yeah, I
It's
used
What,
to live
pretty
there.
California?
sad.
I used to live in California, so what are you talking about?
Well, how long ago did you live there?
I lived there 10 years ago, but I lived there for 20
Yeah,
years.
10 years ago, a lot's changed in 10
Well,
years.
I've been back and visited. I'm just
Oh, okay.
confused.
What part of California? Northern or southern?
Central.
Central? Is there like any major cities around where you come back to visit?
Bakersfield, Fresno.
Isn't
Well,
LA a
I just, from what I've seen, there are a lot of videos of people getting their car windows smashed out and
Oh,
bad stuff. So,
Well, I don't know where you're looking at your videos from.
I mean that happens in major cities all across this country.
It
I mean, we
happens
could
in rural
probably.
areas too.
but a
I
lot of
mean,
these
that's where.
cities, it didn't used to happen. And I
Well,
think in a lot of these cities,
no.
a lot of, like there's been a lot of theft, even here in our state. Like I know somebody who is close to me that works at Walmart, and they can't do anything when anybody tries to leave with
Parts of our rural
stolen
areas
goods.
or have more crime in them than big cities per capita. If you look at the way that crime is shifting in the country, it's coming to
Sure.
rural towns.
Whatever you say.
Um,
Maine,
it's
Maine is ranked 50th for violent crimes in the United States, actually.
Yeah, and we have some of the most liberal guy or pew pew laws too, which is kind of interesting, isn't it?
Mm,
not
I
really.
don't know, maybe.
I don't know.
Alaska. The top five are Alaska, New Mexico, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Louisiana for violent crime. California is not even in the top 10.
Well, Maine's not even in the top 10.
No, Maine is 50th,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
California is not even.
16th.
I don't know what you're
California
talking
is
about.
So
16th.
where are you getting your statistics from?
I just went through three different
No,
websites.
no, no. She's saying that in California, California is even
I don't.
ranked
Hey, hey,
one
Hey,
Kat.
of
Hey, yo,
the
I don't
five
need your.
top
This
violent
is
Listen
where
to me.
crimes.
you raise voices in here. We're not
First of
raising
all,
voices. We're
hey,
having a
I
conversation.
I muted Kat. I don't need you yelling at your whoever across the room. That's weird. Don't do that,
Right.
please. You can mute before you do that. I don't know if this is your first live or not. But anyway,
Thank you.
yeah, I just looked up like world population review. It's not really that. Obviously, that's a good conversation to have at another time. But today we're going to be talking about teaching consent to all ages. Did you have anything you want to talk about in regards to the topic?
What type of what are we talking about exactly?
Like, do you think it's okay for grandma to demand a hug from their grandkid?
I think that it depends on the situation. If the grandson doesn't want to hug the grandma, then she shouldn't force him. No.
Okay.
Mm.
Not all people tend to feel that way. That's why this discussion is here. And there seems to be a lot of discussion about like age appropriate teaching and things like that of what sexuality means.
Is hugging sexuality?
It's consent. There's part of touching going on. It's part of if a person doesn't feel comfortable with you touching them, and have had trauma that way, it could possibly come off that way, I think.
Are you claiming that a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old, 5-year-old has had trauma and that's why they don't want to hug their grandma?
They could,
It
yes,
could.
but not
Yes,
always.
not always. They could just be having a bad day.
Yeah, this is a little bit too vague for me, but thank you so much for having me up, you guys. Have a great evening. Have the evening you all deserve.
Why don't you too?
What the fuck is that?
Who knows?
That
Who knows?
Somebody was touchy.
yeah.
That was very specific, actually.
I think I was trying to be clear. I don't know.
You were clear. You know. Yes, absolutely. Children at a young age can have trauma associated with touching. Yes.
Yes.
It's not always true. That's not always the case for why they may not want to give someone a hug, but absolutely.
I mean, and it could be the kids having a meltdown, a bad day, they're overstimulated, they feel cranky, their diaper needs. I mean, there's a myriad of things, right?
Mhm.
It's just more about respecting a child's space and respecting their autonomy of their own body.
And
I mean,
just because hugging isn't like intrinsically sexual in nature, like by default, doesn't mean that it doesn't still have implications. You know, if a parent feels comfortable to like if a parent is okay with demanding that their kid, you know, go give grandma a hug, you know, then at what point do they say, hey, like, where do they draw the line where the kid has the right to consent whether or not they want to be touched?
Well, I read a memoir and I read it with my students, and it's about an area that we have grown up in. It's written by someone of our area, and it discusses this. Well, it talks about consent because the three kids were often forced to hug their grandma, who was very abusive to them, and it's a very good lesson for younger kids to learn, not through literature like that. I mean, that's reserved for older children, but you know, high school students. But
sorry, Anna.
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
Our fan, Tori, is here tonight asking, what do we mean by consent? Consent means permission for something to happen. That's like the definition. I'm not sure if you needed more information than that, but
What if they say yes because they are innocent and don't know what the adult means? What if they say yes to what?
not Jay Breezy said that. I don't know, leave it to Americans to make an issue out of something that doesn't exist. Holy crap. I have news for you. Child SA and grape happens everywhere. Like everywhere. So it's definitely a conversation worth having because we can help mitigate that by doing some really simple things. We can try to help make that a little less prevalent by, you know, teaching children bodily autonomy. Well, that's the topic. I don't know what you mean. That's the topic.
A hug or a kiss? What if the kid says yes,
Right,
but
the
the
lonely
adult has
mouse.
bad intentions behind the hug or kiss? Well, that's all the more reason why every kid should know consent, and that consent can be withdrawn.
Yes. And when we talk about when I say the topic, of course, teach kids consent at all ages, right? There is age appropriate consent. You can't. Someone might have a bad intent feeling that can happen. Um, there's only so much you can do, but you can start by teaching children like about their body. If a child um, understands their anatomy using scientific terms as opposed to like cute little words that people like to give to children's anatomy. Don't do that, by the way. If they understand consent, like if no means no, and somebody touches them anyway, then we can start teaching them how to stop something from happening by using words, how to understand if something happened to report it much sooner, and to be able to have that situation handled by the proper authorities. Also, not Jay Breezy, you do understand that, like, unfortunately, we live in a world where grandparents can absolutely and do SA children. And when we talk about if a child doesn't want to be hugged by their grandmother, you're setting the stage for a child to understand if they say no, they don't want to be touched, that has to be respected. Even if it's mom, dad, grandparent, you're teaching them not only do they not have to allow adults to touch their body, which is an important lesson, but they also are learning that if I say no to a hug, grandma doesn't hug me, and that makes me feel safe. And if somebody wants me to hug them and they say no, it's okay I'm not going to hug them because I want them to feel safe. So it's really a two-way street because not only do we need to teach children about their own bodily autonomy, we also need to instill in them that everybody has bodily autonomy. Yes, no is a complete sentence. No means no, and in no way, shape, or form do we teach children and teenagers as they're growing into adulthood, as hormones start happening, as they start reaching the ages of which they're going to explore their sexuality. No, in no circumstance should we teach them that when a girl says no, they really mean yes. I have heard adults in my family tell my brother that as children. They're playing hard to get. No, they said no. Nene said kids will second guess their safety instincts when we tell them to go against them. Yeah, and it makes it even more difficult for as you get older to trust your instincts. How many what? Yes, it can.
Oh, AON, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, kids should know what their body parts are called, and they should know, like, if something leads to them being, where questions are asked of them in a courtroom, they should be able to answer those questions without ambiguity and without feeling shame.
So like I was putting together some information which will get updated in the link tree in my bio about consent in case people have any questions or concerns in general. Because a lot of people want to know what exactly do you teach a young child, and you can begin very, very early, like ages 1 through 5. You teach kids to ask permission before touching or embracing their playmate. Like, and then if a kid says no, like let's say you got 2 little toddlers, they're at daycare, and toddler A wants to hug toddler B goodbye. Toddler B says no, then you can positively reaffirm your child and just say that's okay. Just wave and say goodbye, and then it's like literally no big deal. So you're teaching them to respect other people's bodily autonomy. We also want to teach kids like empathy. It's important. Tori, unfortunately, we have to teach kids consent because there's bad people in the world. Also, I'd like you to consider this. We need to teach kids can exo, I can't micromanage everything. You want children to not understand consent? That's creepy. Um, Also, consider this: if we're teaching children consent, then those children are going to be less likely to harm people.
You're an alarmist? No, this is not being an alarmist.
What? Anyway, I don't know what's alarming about teaching kids bodily autonomy. That's weird. Um, you want to help teaching kids empathy is also really important about teaching consent because, like, you got toddlers, they hit, bite, they do crazy stuff, and you want them to stop that. You can ask them, how would you feel if if your friend hit you, and then they can, understand they'd be mad, sad, upset. We can teach them empathy that way. Um, we can teach kids that no and stop are important words. So if you as an adult are, let's say you're playing with your kid, you're tickling the kid, and the kid is telling you no, stop, do that. Stop. That way, and if your kid, let's say your kid wants to, I don't know, is tickling you and you want them to stop, ask them to stop. Explain to them that this is important. I've said no, stop. So make sure you're teaching both ways because we want kids to understand that if they say no about something they don't, like when you're touching them, they say no, that the correct thing to have happen is for that person to have stopped touching them. You want kids to understand that conceptually, and the reverse is true too. Don't be touching people. They say no. No, stop, and I'm done. Yes. They have to, that's a great way to put it, Hila Mama. Those things should be taken seriously because the kids are listening to their body. And we were already talking about don't force kids to hug people. I don't know, Lita. Did you used to be forced to hug your relatives?
Yep. Oh God, it was. Yeah, I have some trauma from um, basically family, friends, and relatives. It's just like I did not want to be touched. I like as a kid, I got picked up a lot and like um, what's the best way to put this? Like the cheek pinching aunties and the actually not only that but also bikers. A lot of cheek pinching, a lot of like really annoying like fast kissing. I don't know what you call that, like that, like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And, and like I just remember all I wanted was to like get out of that situation immediately. I was uncomfortable. I was angry, and I was powerless.
Yeah. You know what's wild? I got my parrots. Anyone who knows me knows that. And I do consent-based training with my birds. Like you can teach, I mean, you can teach parrots a level of consent, right? But parents don't give their kids the same thing is crazy to me. So like if my bird doesn't want me to pick her up, unless there's like an emergency situation, guess what? I don't pick her up. Jason, you
What?
don't want kids to learn um, consent so that they're not harmed by P3DOs. Check your fucking um,
Check that
hard
guy's hard
drive.
drive.
So weird. Jason immediately assumed that we want to teach kids to consent to uh, those sorts of things, and that's literally not even close to being true.
How do you come into a live like this and that's your first thought?
Because because he sexualizes children. That's how.
Hmm.
Fucking gross. Um. Anyway, so we're talking about like ages 1 to 5. Sure, Jason. Sure, you are. We're talking about like ages 1 to 5. So age appropriately. Um, Encourage kids to like actually wash their own genitals. And ask kids permission to like help wash their body. Like you're giving your kid a bath. Ask, hey, is it okay if I wash your back? And if the kid says no, don't make a big deal about it. Give them the washcloth and say, okay, well, you do it. You're dirty. You need to clean yourself up. And that way the kid understands that they have the ability to consent to whether or not they want to be touched, which is really important to teach kids. We also need to allow kids to talk about their Ron, that's not how that works. Um, we also need to teach kids that it's okay for them to talk about their bodies without shame. Teaching children the correct words for genitals. You want to make yourself a safe place to talk about bodies and sex. We're not, obviously, you're not going to teach children ages 1 through 5 how to, about how to have sex. That's ridiculous. No one wants to do that. But you should be teaching kids about penis, vagina. That way, when creepy Uncle Tom calls someone's privates a cookie, it's not confusing. I kind of wish. Oh, right? Yeah, Ron, why don't you share some wealth? I don't know why. I don't know why Ron thought that was like a good comment. His pronouns are he, him. Cool. I don't. If you think you're Brad Pitt, that's a personal problem. I don't think I'm anyone but myself. So, you're doing the big text. I appreciate you liking the live though.
What am I? Oh,
Because I can hear it. There was a video once. That's perfect, Heathen. Yeah, it is. I often see parents and adults disagreeing with that idea. Um, I don't know, Justin. They say that, but I don't believe any. I don't believe people's TikTok stuffs. Um, it is odd to see parents disagreeing with that. Like, I have a really hard time with people who argue against sex ed ages, K through 12, because what they're saying is either they're too ignorant to understand what the age appropriate sexual education looks like, which is scary because they're raising children usually, or B, they're just completely against teaching children about their bodies. And that, I don't know how that doesn't seem dangerous.
well, um, think of all the instances, because we all know somebody who this has happened to, and especially in religious circles, this happens a lot. How many times will a family go to the defense of their own relative who has essayed, a child in their family?
Mm-hmm.
Like
It
you
happens all
mentioned,
the time.
creepy Uncle Tom has what he calls special time with little Billy, and little Billy doesn't know to say anything about it, but sooner or later it comes to light, and then like Billy's parents are like, "No, Tom would never do that. We wouldn't." Even if he did, it would be, it's that's a family matter.
Mm-hmm.
It is like the level of apologetics that they entangle themselves in to defend their own family members. And I'm convinced at this point that a lot of times people don't want their kids to learn about consent or learn what their body parts are called or learn that certain things that happen to them aren't supposed to happen, because if they do, they might tell somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They don't want a kid to know to tell their teacher at school that this thing is happening to them.
Yep. Nene said that they had a friend in 8th grade who was pregnant for the second time. Many were sexually active in junior high. Yes, which is like the next bit of information is like ages 5 through 12. So, um, kids that I've helped assisted in raising, I've done the same thing with each and every one of them. Um, it wasn't, I didn't know when the oldest was little to use proper names, but as soon as I learned that that was the best way to do it, I started doing that. But I started teaching them about consent, about no means no, you don't have to touch people if they don't want. And then when they reach around middle school age, I start talking to them about, not start talking, but I talk to them about how their body changes. I start having very honest conversations about sex, sexuality, consent, enthusiastic consent. I talk to them about how they need to determine their own boundaries. Like if a kid starts wanting to get in a relationship, like you need to talk about how far you want to go. I teach them about how pregnancy works, sexually transmitted disease, protection. I give them all the information, and they hate it, of course. It's so awkward. They're like, completely embarrassed, of course. But that information ultimately keeps them safe. Kids are going to eventually become sexually active, and you can't stop them. What you have to do is teach them how to respect their bodies and the body of their partner.
Right.
Welcome back, Anna.
Sorry about that. I got a phone call.
You're good.
It was the man. Speaking of the man, I was going to talk about this with enthusiastic consent because I'm 52 years old and he's 50 years old, and like as our body changes, our bodies don't do the same things that they used to do, and they don't work the same way they used to do. So in a situation where you're trying to figure out what feels good, what does not feel good, enthusiastic consent can be a real game changer in terms of, I think, intimacy, in terms of partner understanding. And I think it can be a very good thing even as we get older to, it's not always about this idea of passion and spontaneity and and uncontrolled, unbridled passion. Yeah, you have that in relationships, of course. I mean, you go through stages of your life where those things happen, but at the same time, as you get older, your body just doesn't work that way anymore, and new things need to be tried within the comfortability of your relationship. And, my husband and I have had talks about this, and that's something I think it's important for older people as their sexuality changes to explore as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I talked about this on live and stuff. I am part of like the spicy community, if you will, BDSM, and consent is is a huge topic. Of course it is, right? So for me, the idea that you frequently check in for consent is very normal because I'm 40 now. As soon as I turned 18, I went and found community I could join for that specific thing. So it's been over 20 years, 22 years now that I've been doing it. So for me, when I'm with someone new and we're discussing what we want to do, what we don't want to do, and we get to the point we're doing stuff, we're fooling around, and they ask, if they're like, "Hey, can I touch you here?" I think that's actually really hot.
Yeah,
Me too.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, there's something that brings that in a way where you don't have to second guess somebody and you don't have to play pretend. I think it's really cool.
There's something to be said about like, so I used to be like in the swinger communities, and the last event I went to, like initially there was this anticipation that like things were just going to kind of happen, when I started going to these events, but like, once I'd sort of interacted a bit, if I was interested in somebody, it was like second nature to be like, can I kiss you? Like, and like and that goes to enthusiastic consent. It's a lot different to, if you ask that question, you're like, yeah, I guess, versus hell yeah, or of course, like, that's two different answers right there.
BS John has a great question. I mean, we did just talk about it, but they must have just came in. You're going to teach a 2-year-old about consent. Obviously, they don't know how to end a sentence, but that's cool. Yes, because we can teach 2-year-olds no means no, and that we can teach a 2-year-old that if somebody says that they don't want to be hugged or they don't want to be touched, we teach them to respect that. When a 2-year-old hits their friend, we teach them empathy by telling them, how would you feel if that happened? We also can teach 2-year-olds. Oh, I lost my train of thought. I had it right there. Anyway, yes, we can teach 2-year-olds consent. We can teach kids that they say no. If another friend of theirs doesn't want to be touched, we can say that's okay. We can also teach them that if they say no, like let's say you're tickling them and they say no or stop, that you just stop, and that teaches them consent. I don't watch football. Football's dumb.
And my pronouns are she, her. And I love football.
Jay, they should only know that strangers can't people touch your private parts. So if your child did not want a hug from you, you would force them to hug you? I'm a little worried about the answer to this.
Oh God, that's cringy.
Ugh.
So if
Probably,
you
yeah.
didn't want to hug someone, if you didn't want to be hugged by someone and they hugged you by force, how would you feel?
Right.
No, they them is also singular, Shannon. You should probably go look up grammar. It's okay though. That's not what this conversation is about today.
I just fought the urge to address that.
I agree, Aowen. Even if that could, I have never given birth to a child, but that does not mean I have not parented or raised children.
I actually have 5 kids, Jay. So if you want to have that conversation with me, I would be glad to have that conversation with you.
It scares me that Jay has children, and when their child says, "Don't touch me," he does it anyway. You
Fine.
understand that you're modeling behavior for your child. So when another adult who they think they can trust but maybe can't touches them and they don't want to touch, they're just going to let it. They're going to let him do it. Yeah, you say you don't kiss them. What do you mean?
Yes. If a kid doesn't want to kiss, don't kiss them.
Or a
Like,
hug, or a touch.
I mean,
Kids are really good at letting you know what they want and when they want it.
Stop.
I think
Stop what, Jay? What do you mean?
yeah, just
Jay,
because we're saying
if
teach kids about consent doesn't mean you shouldn't also learn about consent, Jay.
Jay, if an adult walks up to you and kisses you and you didn't want them to, how would you feel? Tomorrow's not even Sunday. My username is Unicorns and Sass. You can see it. My name isn't they them. My pronouns are. This is weird. Do you not know how like sentence structure works?
Or English.
So strange. Everyone says I'll stoop down to greet a kid if they and offer them a hug, but if they don't want it, they don't even open their arms. I'm
You know, I just
I
met
don't know.
my son's girlfriend's little boy recently, and I did not want to run up, hug him, or overwhelm him at all. So I came up with this thing where it's like, okay, bud, you want a high five, fist bump, hug, or nothing? And he would let me know. It wasn't that big of a deal. And we like totally bonded on that. And I don't know why that should be a weird thing to ask a kid. Like, even if you feel the need to hug someone, why can't you just, say that?
I'm gonna I'm gonna assume that Jay left because Jay realized that they were being really gross with their forcing children to let him touch them. That's not okay. Why? Does that even sound okay when
No,
you say it out loud?
no.
Anyhow, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when you get a chance, can I have mod powers?
You don't have mod powers?
No, because I have to use my
Jay is
backup
on a
account right now. Oh, you weren't around yesterday.
Oh,
My main got bananaed, and then this one actually did, but I was able to successfully appeal this one.
oh, this says you have mod powers.
Oh,
Um, so we were talking about, Anna brought up about like consent as an adult, and as even in if you're in an established relationship. And I'd seen Eowyn have a comment. It's really important to understand that, like, first of all, consent, enthusiastic consent, applies to no matter what, how old you get, how long you've been with somebody. If you're married, not married, doesn't matter. Enthusiastic consent applies all the time. You can't um if your wife says no, obviously you don't have consent. Okay, gone are the days I'm going to fuck around and find out. What do you mean stay away from kids? There are no children in this live. It's probably Jay. Jay came
How
back on
weird.
a burner.
How weird.
Alex
It's
is in it. They choose to be an overhugger.
That's a little bit of what's it called? Projection.
Projection.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, gone are the days to go find Jay because Jay's touching kids even though they're his kids. If they say no, he still touches them. So you might want to go find Jay Cooper for that message.
Another guy was talking about wings, and now I got some chicken wings.
Listen. Oh shoot. That's fine. I'm sure he's gonna comment and then I can block him because he's a dick. Anyway, as I was saying, consent is when we're talking about consent in adults. Obviously not. Obviously not, buddy.
No, that's not what we're talking about.
What?
We're not talking about the age of consent for sex. That is not what we're talking about. God almighty, people. Follow along, please.
Kids.
It is really
I
fun
will
that this
say
is their
though,
first thought.
that kids at any age can say no to like a hug. And I have to say that because Jay a few minutes ago didn't seem to understand that was true. You can teach children consent. No, John, I don't consent to talking about football. No means no. I already told you that. Obviously, you should probably be quiet and listen because you don't understand consent.
Good idea.
As I was saying. Yes, kids are allowed to say no at any age and determine who has access to their body. That's the beginning of this lab was definitely about teaching kids about consent at a young age. You're just trying to get me mad about my pronouns. It's whatever. So anyway, when we talk about consent as you grow up, and specifically we'll talk about in adults, consent is the agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity, obviously. I don't need you to make sure of that, though. It's weird. Consent cannot be given by people who are incapacitated by drugs or alcohol. I hate that I have to say that, but obviously I do. Do you know what else is kind of strange? I don't think that we should be engaging on like TikTok lives with people who are obviously very drunk because consenting to what's happening on that live, and it's weird. Stop doing that.
Really weird.
Like, don't engage in drama stuff with someone who is clearly intoxicated. They're not able to consent to that conversation. Anyway, and a very important term we were talking about.
What do you mean kids can't give us consent either? Sure they can. They can say no. They should be allowed to say no by their parents.
I think this person thinks that consent exclusively has to do with sex.
It doesn't. That's Jesus, do we need to spell everything out with every single word?
Apparently.
Apparently we do.
The people that are coming in here and assuming that this live is about teaching kids to consent to adult activities are really creeping me out.
Me too. I'm not comfortable with it.
No, why would you assume that? That's the weirdest thing I've ever. I don't automatically. Anyway, when we're talking about consent with adults, though, enthusiastic consent is like a term that people should be very familiar with.
And the website for that is RAINN, I believe, right? RAINN. And it's a great resource for you to look up consent and the kind of consent we're talking about. Jack Basham. Your children, how many children do you have? Our children. What our children are you talking about?
Hey, Cowboy Surfer, I'm not going to change my headline because you immediately sexualize children.
Right.
That's a you problem, not a me problem. Again, and in our schools, I'm much more concerned about what's going on in churches than in
Yeah,
schools.
me too.
I think for all of the newcomers, we may need to go back and re-explain what consent at all ages means because they seem to be very confused. Um, we were originally in the beginning of this live talking about how we teach kids ages 1 through 5 about consent, which involves teaching kids to ask permission before they touch, hug, or to hug their friends, before they give a high five, pat them on the back, teach them to ask permission first. If another kid tells your kid no, they don't want to be touched, give that your child a positive reinforcement. That's okay. You don't have to give them a hug. Um, Help create empathy. Like if your kid hits another kid, ask them how that would make them feel. And we also want to teach kids that no means no. If you are playing with your child and let's say you are tickling them and they say no, stop, you stop. That way your child
Definitely.
learns to understand and models that behavior with other people because teaching kids consent is not only important to protect them so that they understand that if they don't want someone to touch their body, they don't have to let them. It's also going to help them as they get older to know if someone says no, don't touch me, that they're not going to do it.
It is concerning the number of people coming in here just immediately thinking, like they see the word consent and they instantly think consent, children, sex, what?
Right.
Yes,
It's pretty
because
telling. It's pretty
yes,
telling.
it really is. I bet every one of them has conservative and God in their bio.
Oh,
Anyway, we also want to teach kids, young kids, to like about their body. We want to teach them scientific terms and names for their bodies because that also protects them. And if anything happens and they have to go to court, they don't have to. It makes that process actually work because if they don't know the names for those parts, it's a problem. We should never force your kids to touch, kiss, hug anyone that they don't want to.
Not Aunt Betsy, not Uncle Tom, not Uncle
Grandma,
Jasper, not
not
Grandma,
not
none of that.
dad or mom.
Not dad, not mom, not brother, not sister.
Well, that's fortunate for you, Mike, but all of the other children whose parents said the same thing and then didn't do that when something happened weren't that lucky.
No, it doesn't work
Like,
like that
would
for
it,
everybody, Mom.
your parents telling you that if somebody touches you inappropriately, that that person is no longer going to be alive, that doesn't stop them from touching you.
And
Like
that
that,
also
that
puts
doesn't
more
even.
fear into the child thinking that you might be responsible for someone else's death, even if they did hurt you. So it might be even counterintuitive to what you are telling your child. Did you
so
ever
they
think
think
it's
can.
weird.
What is Jake trying to say here?
Jake thinks that if you teach a child um, that no means no, if like you go to hug your child and they say no and you don't hug them, that means that when you say okay, it's time to brush your teeth, um, that they're going to say no and then they're not going to do anything. Okay, but we can. Okay, Mike. Anyway, also, so that's what we do for kids 1 through 5. We also can teach the children that young to be able to read facial expressions and body language through books, charade style guessing, teach them what emotions look like, and teach kids to trust their gut instinct. If they're scared of somebody, forcing them to be with that person is not a good idea. Don't do that. Allow them that space. Maybe they are shy. Maybe they just take a while to warm up, but we can reinforce children to understand that that's okay and to allow them to grow comfortable with adults without who are in fact safe, obviously. It's so weird. And then with children, since we have to talk about this because the people coming in this live seem to think that teaching kids consent is terrible. With ages 5 through 12, we should talk to kids about their bodies are going to change using scientific and direct terms. You want to answer questions without shame. You want to talk about it in realistic, scientific, and biological terms. You want to approach it without shame or embarrassment. Otherwise, children will learn that there's something wrong with asking you questions and coming to talk to you about their bodies, which is not something that you want. And if it's hard for you to do, you can always say, hey, I want to make sure I give you the right information. Let's talk about that after dinner tonight. Set a time, a place, go look up what you feel you need to say, and then have that conversation when you say you're going to. If we educate children about their bodies in scientific and biological terms, then they are going to be able to know if something happens, or they're going to be able to know if something happens to another kid, and they can find a trusted adult to disclose that information. We also teach kids good touch, bad touch, so that they understand what is bad, what a bad touch is. A 5-year-old can say, I don't want a hug, or I do want a hug, Popsicle. Listen, please, y'all are so weird. You understand that you come in here to a conversation that I'm having that actually helps prevent childhood essay and grape. And your first assumption is that by teaching kids consent, that you think that means that I'm saying to teach that kid it's okay to have essay happen. But the problem is that that's a you problem. Like, the fact that you immediately sexualize children when we talk about consent is very creepy.
Maybe one of the mods should check out their personal profiles when they start talking about this and see what kind of people that they have lined up in their profiles. I don't know. It's weird.
Thank you, Kelsey. Yeah, it's
Kelsey,
very strange.
Thank you, Kelsey.
We should also teach kids ages 5 through 12. This is a suggestion about like safe words with play. So if you're playing with a group of kids and they're not comfortable, they can like teach their kids a safe word. And also we can teach kids to stop every once in a while when they're playing games and check in with their kids. Or check in with the other kids, ask them if they're having fun. This is modeling behavior for in the future to know to check in when they are adults and they are participating in sexual activities as adults, that they know to check in frequently. I saw your first comment. It's your second comment that is the problem. I read every one of those comments, Popsicle. I can read and talk at the same time. I know it's hard sometimes to do 2 activities at once, but this I can manage.
This person says, you can teach your kids however you want. I'll raise mine. Do you not want to teach your kids what consent is? Because that's a little concerning. Are you against teaching your child that they can say no?
Popsicle. A child can give consent to wanting a hug. Do you think that there's something wrong with that? A child can that's what I said. That is what I said. This is how, Jesus Christ.
This is what the panel believes, Popsicle. The panel says that children can say no.
No.
Well, I feel like Popsicle is reading something into this that isn't there. Like, nobody is saying that a child can consent to sex.
Long destroyer. The conversation that we're having is about teaching children consent. As ages, I started at ages 1 through 5, which you can talk to your children younger than that, obviously, about like, I'm going to change your diaper now. The kid may not understand it, but you're teaching them modeling behavior for consent anyway. But ages 1 through 5, you can teach children that no means no. You don't force kids to give adults a hug or a kiss. These are things that you can teach children at ages 1 through 5, and I hope that you do. You should also teach your kid the scientific terms for their anatomy. That's right, Elk. They don't need to give me a hug. What do you mean? Even nonverbal children can give signs that say no, push away, cry, turn away. Yes, that's one of the other, that's one of the things ages 1 through 5 that we can teach kids is how to read body language and facial expressions. Even nonverbal children can then know, or, they can know how to express a no as well. So other children will know when that child is saying no. Excellent point, Aowen. It's not the problem in Popsicle is that it's not basic life, because the amount of people that have come in here saying that they don't need to teach children consent is very weird. I am terrified.
Yeah. So did I see correctly? Somebody earlier said that they'll teach their kids about consent when they're older.
Yes.
Like, if that's not the most friggin' creepiest thing I've read all night. Yes, dear.
So we were talking about ages 1 through 5, 5 through 12, and then like 13 to young adults. We want to teach kids more in depth about good touch, bad touch, because middle schoolers begin participating in games where they're like smacking each other in the butt or touching each other in ways that other people may not want to be touched.
Right.
So you want to get kids to talk about how that would impact one another, like how if a kid walked up, if you're in middle school and someone walks up and like smacks your butt and you didn't want that, how would that make you feel? So you would teach your children to have that conversation, say no, they need to ask consent before touching someone else, even if it's a hug. People in this live are parents, Lisa. Parents are also talking about this.
Right.
This is so weird. I don't want anybody's children to go through SA or GRAPE, so I think that they all need to learn about consent. All children. I don't know why you wouldn't be concerned about other people's children and make sure that they're not and want them not to be SA and GRAPE. That's weird.
Hey, Lisa, if you want to, you can come up in the box. I'm a parent. I'll be glad to talk to you.
I get that. If anyone does that to my son, he doesn't like it and he hits them, I'm okay with that. Automatically going to violence is interesting, sure. Anyway, another thing for teenagers and young adults is we should teach teens body positivity, because cyberbullying begins at a young age, and when usually specifically girls are bullied and cyberbullied about their body, they become ashamed of their body, and it opens them up for additional grooming and SA. Why does you being a Gen Xer mean that it's okay for you to have a page full of red flags? Anyway, we were talking about starting sex talks with middle schoolers, incorporating information about sex, explain enthusiastic consent starting in middle school, which is something that I have done with children that I've helped raise and parent in middle school, because they need to know. Teach them about asking permission before touching someone. Yes means yes, no means no. Nip locker room talk right in the bud right away. So if you have a child that is sexualizing another child or objectifying them, teach them that that's not okay. Talk honestly. I really liked this one. We can talk honestly about kids, about partying with middle schoolers and on up, because as much as you may not like it, and you can make it very clear to your child that you don't want them to be drinking or doing drugs, that they may very well experiment, and you want them to be prepared for that. So you want to, talk to them about how will you know if you've drank too much? What would you do if your friend was driving and they were drunk or on drugs? You have to be a safe call for your parent to keep them safe. How they would know how would you know if you crossed into addiction? How does behavior change when you're intoxicated? And then how will you know if it's okay to touch someone or have sex with them? Like, you need to teach children that if their friends have been drinking or on drugs and they see someone engaging in sexual acts with them, that they need to check in and stand up for that and make sure they seek for help, and just be careful not to victim blame. You can't blame a child. You can't blame someone who was drunk and saying, well, they were drunk, they should have known better. Don't do that, please. I hope everyone who was in here thinking that teaching kids consent meant something nefarious has listened to all of that. I just rambled. Hey, Kelsey, welcome to the Sass Show.
You didn't ramble. I thought all of that was beautiful. I wanted to just
Thank you.
come up really quick. and just explain what we did in my classroom when I was teaching kindergarten to teach them consent. What we would do at the beginning of every class is every student of mine would line up in front of my classroom, and they would have three options. They would have one, they could give me a hug. Two, they could give me a big high five. Or three, they could wave. And I had a rainbow sign taped up next to my door on the outside, and it gave three options. And all my students would pick which option that they wanted for that day. And every student would pick a different option depending on their mood that day. And I'm going to tell you, most of my students gave me a hug. When
That's awesome.
when they were sad, when they were happy, even on the first day with their parents, they would give me a hug. The ones who weren't comfortable were comfortable giving me high fives. And the ones who weren't, we waved. It was amazing. And then I used the same method when I moved to my sixth graders. And as you know, sixth graders are older and they're coming into their minds and their bodies. And I can tell you with all honesty, 95% of them still chose hugs. So they were given the options for all three. Consent can be taught in many different ways, in many different levels and forms. It doesn't have to be sexual at all. And that's all that I wanted to throw in at the moment.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Kelsey, I appreciate you and sharing that information because that's exactly the sort of thing that we're talking about. You're giving children an option, teaching them that if they say no or they don't want to, that's okay, and not forcing physical contact, which is literally what this is how you start with that.
Exactly. And
Dionysus,
all of their parents were aware of my policy as well. So that is what I wanted to share. I'm going to go ahead and drop down.
thank you,
How you
Kelsey.
doing?
Dionysus, welcome to the Sass Show.
How's it going tonight?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. I just want to say that's like the best topic I've ever seen. Like that has on TikTok today, and actually within the past week. That's what a lot of people don't understand about these books is it's a way to teach them about the creepy old man that wants to watch you while you're mowing the lawn, and like that's not right. And like normally with my experience, like I've been to prison, I've been to jail, like the loudest homophobes are usually the deepest and the darkest in the closet. Like they hate themselves, but they still want the pleasure, and then they hate the person that gives them pleasure because they feel as though they're less than, and that's a dangerous combination when you have a self-loathing, self-aggravated man in the closet who's still going out and fulfilling these deeds. You know what I mean? So it's like it's disturbing to say the least, but like even like that movie Sound of Freedom, like that was done by the Latter-day Saints Church basically, and they're in the middle of a whole bunch of stuff, never mind their history. And
Yeah.
yeah, go
Two of
ahead.
the, at least I know one of the directors, I believe, I have to go look it up. And there's at least two people right now who are under investigation or been arrested for crimes related to children.
Yeah,
Which is,
there's
yeah.
a TikTok who covered it pretty well. Kez, Kes. He did it
Yes.
really well.
Yeah.
He covered all the bases. It was pretty it was pretty damning. But
Yes.
yeah, it's just it's concerning that like it's true. It's sadly true, and People just don't see it. But I think there's going to be a lot of exposure on this. Like, I don't know why they let the Boy Scouts reopen, but the Catholic Church is a corporation just like the Boy Scouts, right? It became a corporation in the 1800s. So there's like certain ways to prosecute a corporation like that. And the way they did it to the Boy Scouts needs to kind of be copied again with them, because there's like crazy evidence coming out now from France and other countries. But I just wanted to say, like, great topic. I believe it should be taught the very instant. Consent on everything, any type of consent. Like, it's just I don't understand why it's such a problem for people. We were taught sex ed way back in the day, like
Well,
fifth
a
grade,
lot
sixth grade.
a lot of people don't understand when we talk about teaching sex ed K through 12 is a topic point. I could have put up here, but I wanted to talk more about consent. A lot of adults don't understand consent, as my comment section earlier would attest to. They think that that means that we're going to teach kindergartners about sex acts, and that's couldn't be further from the truth, because teaching sex ed K through 12 involves teaching kindergartners consent, like that no means no. It's
In
really that
steps,
simple.
yeah.
Yeah, it's age appropriate. So when people say that they don't want their children to know the proper names of anatomy, or they don't want their kid to know about no means no, it's very terrifying. That's not good.
Yeah, because like that's what can you say the word groomer on TikTok like
I
anymore?
think
Like,
I
can you
think
say
you can
anything?
say. I think you can say. I don't know. We just said it. So wait, hold on.
Yeah,
I think you
so that's
can, because
that's
I've
what
seen some lives
that's
where
what
that
those
word was used a
people.
lot.
Yeah, they don't want that taught because it's going to teach them that place they're not supposed to touch is actually off limits, and not like a nice, you know what I mean, whatever they want to call it, place that they want to games with. Because it happened to my son. My son's mother had a relationship with another man after we got divorced, and had a child with him, and this man liked to play pew pew with their guns together. And like they
Mm,
did it out in the shed, and he told him not to tell anybody. And like he told me this, but he wouldn't tell the investigator it in private. You know what I mean? Like they do. They bring him into a private room by themselves. They can't coerce it out of him. It has to come out naturally. And I was like, my son said no to it, and I almost didn't even want to. It was going to be traumatizing. And
hmm
that's what they do. They fake like body parts are like toys.
Yep.
And like this one kid just brought something to me that was very eye opening as far as dolls go. Like blow
Oh, you cut out there.
is non-consent because
Oh, there we go.
oh
You cut out a little bit.
the blow up dolls is a way of like that's like teaching non-consent because a blow up doll can't say anything and dolls can't say anything, so it's like that's another tool that groomers use is like, you know what I mean. So it's like I never looked at blow up dolls like that, but it's like it's almost true, like, like, oh yeah, I do it with my doll, so we can do it together, like type grooming mentality. And like this is like, you ever hear of the theory like no safe spaces, like no trust spaces, where like you can't be alone with like a child unless there's another adult, there's cameras, you know what I mean? Like that has to be like normalized too. Like people can't be like, oh, I don't want my children on camera. Like, dude, honestly, with today's day, like I,
Hmm
I think there should be cameras all over public schools and elementary schools. Like,
I agree 100%. And I'm a teacher.
yeah, it's like, have you seen that website, whoismakingthenews.com?
Oh, I can imagine.
Oh, golly gee, you guys haven't seen it. Who is making the news.com? Just like that, spelled out one word with .com. Oh, man. Yeah, it's
Who's
troubling to
making the
say the least.
news.com?
Yeah,
Um,
she's on TikTok. It's a trans woman, lawyer down in Florida, who was just sick of the Christians saying it was all trans. So she went out and got the court documents. It's crazy. It's sickening, actually. It's very scary, but it's good to have like black and white empirical data to show like, no, this isn't what happening. But go ahead. Sorry.
so I have there's a child in my orbit who was essayed by their step parents. And one of the reasons that they came forward was because I had had a conversation with children when they reach around middle school, talking about consent and bodily autonomy, and that's when they became aware that what was happening was bad. Now, if that, if we
Exactly.
had
Yeah.
known if we had known to teach like the scientific names and no means no at an age appropriate manner, I don't know. I mean, obviously things can still happen and you can't blame anyone but the person who did it. um I just wonder how things would have been different. That's why this conversation is really important, is because we can teach kids, we can help mitigate it.
Yeah, consent should be taught like from the very start of any type of moving, talking, and interaction with any other person. Honestly, just so and honestly to protect your child from maybe touching another child inappropriately too. Like you have to teach
Yeah.
that because then it might turn into like a thing where they start doing it together and normalize it at a young age, and that's also not cool. So it's like, I mean, like I grew up in Gen X where like boys were having like sword fights with pea streams and stuff. You know what I mean? Like it was like, but nowadays you got people who are doing like TikTok is disturbing sometimes actually.
Hmm.
Like
It is.
these NPCs, I think they're all like tagging programs with, you know what I mean? Like, where they're doing like the stuff online, and it's it's um it's disturbing. TikTok doesn't really do much. I guess their trust and safety is like so short staffed they can't even like police TikTok anymore.
It is difficult. Squishy said, and people need to stop withholding affection because the kid said no. And I understand that. Hey, Squishy, that they mean that like if a kid says no, they don't want to be hugged, don't hug them, but don't withhold future affection. I would assume that's what you mean. Um, yeah, it is like a TikTok can be a very scary place. There just not that long ago, a lot of people made videos about the guy who said if women turned him down because he's a nice guy, they deserve to be raped, which just really highlights the fact that adults don't understand consent. Because if someone says no, then they don't consent. That doesn't mean anything.
Men who believe that on the belief alone should be locked in prison. It's not. It's like okay, like take for instance. Imagine if just imagine telling somebody who's gay to stop being gay. It's the same thing who's attracted to minors. Like you can't. That's an attraction that's kind of ingrained. I believe violent people and people who mess with animals are the only ones who belong in prison. And like violent is like okay, if you get in a fight or do something, you spend a little time. You do something else, you spend a little longer time. But like people who are attracted to minors like that, it's a biological, neurological, like ingrained in their person. You know what I mean? Like it's it's just the same as trying to force or like sending like Christian kids to like gay camp to re-straight them or whatever. It's the same thing as like they need to be like put in their own places, like monitored heavily, or I am all for chemical castration.
Um, I don't maybe I don't know if I don't know.
Kelsey, I know,
The camps
re-straight them. I
could
didn't know how to say anything.
conversion camps. You're talking about
Conversion camps,
conversion
all
camps,
right.
yeah, conversion camps, yeah. Which should never happen. Just like those programs that like kidnap kids out of their bed in the middle of the night and take them into the
Yo.
wilderness. Those need to be ended too. That's
So
further
there's one of
consent
those that
stuff.
you can you can report those places to the Center for Abused, Exploited, and Missing Children, and they will investigate to their fullest extent. And I would suggest everybody doing that to any type of those organizations. Yeah, that's those places are. Did you see the sister and brother who ran away from one on TikTok? And they were
Yeah.
they were like in hiding from their mother, like trying to wait till they turned 18 so they could like claim sovereignty or whatever.
I did. I did. It's super crazy. Um, Katie said, everyone needs to remember a person in a wheelchair or any assistant device needs to have consent to touch. Yeah, Katie, I think I know where you're going with that. And that's true too. I started this live out talking about to teach consent, kids consent at all ages, because it's an important, we have to start somewhere, right? We have to start teaching kids consent, not only so that they can be protected, but they understand consent as they get older. Because if a boys are taught boys will be boys and they think they can go around doing whatever they want, that's a problem. Um, but yeah, you need consent for, like, adults need to practice consent all the time too. When someone is using an assistance device, they definitely need to have consent for that.
Dionysus just dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
It's also, I'm going to go back to Anna was talking about, she was talking about, sorry, she was talking about in adults, when we talk about consent when it comes to adults, and as you get older, your body changes, and we should continue to have conversation about consent as we with our partners, like, all the time. Because if your partner says no, whether you're married or not, no means no. And we do, yes, I agree, Mrs. Diesel. Teach your boys that when another child says no, it means no. It doesn't mean try harder. Like, no means no. We don't need, it's outdated practice, but I still hear people doing it today where they tell their boys, oh, she said no. That just means she's playing hard to get. No, she said no. That means no. We don't need to play hard to get, okay? We don't talk about Bruno. That's weird. Yes, and the boys that will be boys rhetoric. It's in my notes, Squishy. I agree. And that too. Also, when we talk about consent as adults, it doesn't just mean sexually either. There's a lot of stuff that people do to one another that's not consensual. Like, for instance, if you, Anna, let's say you sent me a picture of, like you sent me a family photo, right, Anna?
Right.
Okay, you send that picture to me. Does that mean that since you sent it to me, that I now have the right to post that on the internet?
No, you do not.
Because irregardless of the fact that you sent it to me, right? Like, you don't get to send it to other people unless I say, Anna, is it okay if I send this to so and so or here? And then if you say yes, it is.
Right.
Right? That's a basic consent.
Right.
So even irregardless of the picture, if you're sending pictures, you and your adult friends are sending pictures to one another of whether it's adult material or just things like family photos, photos of children, photos of your home, photos of personal stuff. One person sending that person to another person, no matter what, does not give the receiver the right to send that to other people. This is a consent basic I thought we could just address really quick.
Right. It's because, like, think about it from old times without computers, right? When people come over to the house, you ask them, do you want to see my family photos? Right? You want to look at family photos. You sit down and you look at family photos together. right? It's a sharing of that. They don't take those family photos out of your house and then go show them to other people. I mean, when you put something on the internet, of course, like Facebook, for instance, you put up your family pictures. I mean, those are all for public consumption and all is well and good there. But when you're actively trying to destroy somebody with that information, that's when it becomes sketchy and borderline, if not already a crime, right?
Can you imagine if, like, before computers, you pull out your family album and you're showing your buddy, and you like go to the bathroom and they take a picture, and then they go and they give it to somebody else, because, well, you showed it to me, so I can do whatever I want now, right? Can you imagine that scenario?
It's so weird. It's like common decency and common courtesy has left the building when it comes to the internet, and it's not the Wild West. And people are getting hip to it, and there will be laws passed against the things that we're talking about now, about those types of things, if not already. But the problem is right now is with enforcement, because there's not enough people out there to enforce these things. So it becomes upon us to try to curb the situation by speaking about things like this.
Agreed. And when we talk about photos, and we go back to not just like family photos, but let's say you're sending nude photos to people. If you send that photo to someone, they don't have consent to share it no matter what happens. That's just basic consent, right? We need to be sure that we're teaching our children this information as they grow up, like about internet and cell phones and cameras and security, about taking pictures, and especially children, because children can be charged with CP. Like, that's a thing that happens to kids when they're, like, let's say they're 16 and they got a boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever, and they're sending pictures of one another, they can be charged. And it's important that even though if someone sends photos, right, and that the person they send it to turns out can't be trusted and sends it to other people, it's not their fault. But we do need to teach children, not little kids, obviously, but like as kids get older, age appropriately, that those photos that they sent to somebody are not in their control anymore, and so they need to be very careful with that.
Yes. There is
it's
a
called
certain
digital
amount.
Literacy.
Yes, and it's digital literacy. It's about learning what you can and can't do, and your own comfort levels and your own boundaries. And there comes a certain amount of personal responsibility that comes with sharing. We kind of had this conversation today in regards to something else, in regards to me, and talking about, experiences and things that other women I've talked to have had. It's not just, it's the type of technology you're using to send it, but whether it's email, app, all of that matters, right? And so you have to be very careful as to what you're doing. And if you, even as an adult, navigating those waters are treacherous. I can't imagine doing it as a child. So,
we don't talk about, Bruno just called this Bidenomic. So apparently, consent is somehow Biden. Very weird comment. Mrs. Diesel, welcome to the Sass Show.
Yay.
Hey, Mrs. Diesel.
I forgot why I requested.
So
I taught mine from the moment that they started talking, by the way.
Perfect, which is great. And the people that were saying that was bad really kind of creeped me out.
When my kids got old enough to talk and it was diaper change time, I'd be like, need to change your poopy diaper. No. And they run away. And oh, I guess you're going to sit and poop. Oh, no, I don't want to sit and poop. And they would come back. It's like that natural consequence that they understand that this needs to be done. And, and talking them through the logic of it too is important. This is why I have to do this to keep you clean, and being that kind of parent too, and explaining to them why that's important, in an age appropriate way. Poopy.
I agree.
So
just an
go
FYI.
ahead. Go ahead.
A 00 account, Brooke had commented about sharing private conversations on TikTok consent, and I blocked them just because that's a troll account. But I will say that yeah, I don't like if I'm having a conversation with Mrs. Diesel in DMs and then she takes that DMs and posts it on the internet, I don't agree with that. Now, I will say that I have been in situations where I didn't stop that from happening. And there are some situations where, like, if I'm having a conversation with someone and they turn around and lie about that conversation to the whole of the internet, I don't mind violating that because don't lie about what I said. But I've participated in situations that weren't that I have apologized to people for because I don't agree with that.
So one thing that happened to me was my grandmother took a picture of my eldest daughter when she was an infant. It was her first photo shoot. I got, the baby photo shoot, and I had gotten the pictures back, and she took one of the pictures off of my computer and emailed it to a friend. And that friend's email got hacked. And my child's photo ended up on a P3DO site.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's just one way where not asking for consent can go very, very, very badly.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways that it definitely goes badly. And I just
I was
don't
laughing at Jen's comment, by the way.
I don't understand why it's like I was too. I just don't get it. I don't get why it's so hard for people to understand that that the damage is being done to the kids when you don't teach them how to protect themselves in this world.
Well, and also, like Mrs. Diesel said, when family members send out pictures. So, like, I remember even when my eldest niece was born, gosh, I was in my early 20s. No, I think I was younger than that. Anyway, I don't want to talk about it. I feel old now. I asked if it was okay to post pictures on my social media, and I was told I could whenever I wanted. But I remember asking, and that was very early, obviously the Stone Age of the internet.
Yeah, I mean,
Katie said that she used to teach kids digital citizenship. I love that.
yeah, I think that's great. We do that too. I'm actually trying to teach a cyber ethics class at school now. I'm trying to talk them into doing a cyber ethics class, which would be fun, I think.
That could be a good topic all by itself, digital citizenship.
Yes.
I
think it's a great
encourage
topic for this
parents
episode.
to teach their children sign language, at least baby sign language.
Yes.
Because you can, if they can communicate, because they can communicate from infancy.
Yes.
And there are signs for no and stop and no more. Mm-hmm. And it allows them to communicate consent with you at an earlier age. And not just don't touch me, but like, I'm done with my food. That way you're not continuing to shove a spoon in their mouth when they don't want the spoon to be shoved in their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I can just hear like the dissenting voices in my head right now saying, I grew up, we didn't have to use no stupid sign language, and I'm not teaching my kid that shit.
I can also
right, and there have been studies that show that children that were taught baby sign language or sign language period have a higher intellect. They usually have higher IQs because you have been working with that part of their mind.
Maji said that theirs was taught baby sign language until she could speak. I love that. Um, I didn't know that could be a thing until a lot of kids were older in my family, but gosh darn it.
If parents want to give
My
their kids something really good to watch on YouTube, they can give them Miss Rachel because Miss Rachel teaches you sign language.
Uh, Jen, determined to thrive, is my cousin. Also taught sign language to her youngest. And I know that she does work with autistic children. I was talking about, so we were talking about like teaching consent to children. And one of the things that are recommended is to teach children to read body language and facial expressions, which would be cool for neurotypical children. But I don't quite know how that would translate for children who are on the autism spectrum. I don't know if the comment section is big enough for you to answer that question.
I remember when it came up. So one thing that, because I think I've told y'all guys that I have talked to my children forever about consent. It's sometimes a weekly, sometimes a monthly sit down that we all have where I talk to them about consent and maybe some things that have happened that week or month where I didn't, or they didn't really practice consent in that, like somebody took somebody else's chips. Well, you didn't ask for those chips, and those weren't your chips. You didn't get consent for those. But one thing that I make sure that I tell my kids is I don't say no means no. I say nothing but yes means yes. If they are unconscious, they cannot give consent. If you are in the middle, if somebody says, if you say, can I have some of your chips? And the person goes, sure, you can have some of my chips, and you take a chip, and then later they go, I don't want you to have any more of my chips, the consent has been taken away. It can be taken away at any time. So not only no, just not yes.
That's awesome. And what's great about that is while it might be about something as simple as chips, this is like modeling behavior for children as they grow when it comes to consent about when it comes to consent with their partners as they're teenagers and, as they're exploring themselves sexually. You show pictures of people saying no or feeling emotions if they can comprehend it. Okay. Which is similar idea. I'm sure there's some amount of ways to help that. Thanks, Jen. I appreciate you answering that question. In that tiny comment section.
Am I going to tell this story? I worked at a school that was mainly for extremely, that's the wrong word. It was for autistic children who had been basically given up by all of the other schools. There were no schools that were willing to take them anymore. They, and a lot of them were nonverbal. And one of the biggest crimes that happens to nonverbal children is SA.
Mm-hmm.
Which is horrid. But you can, once again, I'm going to go back to sign language. You can teach, if you start teaching sign language to your infant, that can grow, and they can, if they end up being a nonverbal child or human, they can still give or take away consent.
That is fantastic advice. I should have had that I'm going to add that to my little document that I just wrote in case I ever talk about this again, because teaching children sign language as a form of being able to say no is perfect. And no, Bird Dog, why do you think that children would be drinking, driving, or getting tattoos? I guess we've hit back around to the people who don't understand that consent isn't just about like sexuality. It's also about bodily autonomy. Okay, so children can consent to whether or not they want to hug, whether or not they want to be tickled. Also, with especially with young children, between the ages of like maybe 2 to, I don't know, how would you stop picking out your kids' clothes for them? Depends on the kid, right? You can give them options in picking what they want to wear as opposed to forcing them to what you want. We can teach them bodily autonomy.
Or when they don't want to share their toys.
You, Bird Dog, you think you should wait to teach children to say to decide whether or not they want to hug until they're 18?
That's creepy.
I don't see that one.
Is that a filtered comment?
No, well, first they asked about drinking, smoking, get a tattoo, and then Jen said short and appropriate. They said 18. They were responding to the drinking part, but I was talking about a hug. Okay. They were talking about the tattoo. Huckleberry, that's not necessarily true. Most kids want hugs. Some don't. If not, unless you're a parent, you shouldn't. I didn't want to be touched as a child, even by my parents. And if you have a kid, Annie, okay, if you have a child and your child says, no, I don't want to be hugged, just because you gave birth to that children or are their parent does not mean that you should force them to give you a hug. Annie, in order to prevent children from being groomed or to help that, we need to teach them bodily autonomy and consent. These people, I feel like I just came back on the FYP.
I think you did.
I can.
Did it get shared by
imagine.
somebody?
I can imagine that's very difficult, Jen. I didn't see it get shared. No, I can imagine that too. Yeah. And it's especially interesting because like older generations, like our parents, they were taught that people should, like you have to hug adults. We were told that as kids, and so it's hard. It's they need to learn.
I was actually told multiple times that you don't tell an adult no. You don't tell your elders no. And because of that, I thought I wasn't allowed to when I was being essayed. I thought I said no, and then he would be able to go to my dad or grandma, and I would literally get in trouble because I told my elder no.
Well, Huckleberry, I hope that you should. That's great if that's how your 14-year-old feels. But also, I would recommend if they don't already know this, that you teach them to ask before they hug people, because if that person doesn't want to be hugged, they need to know. And many of us here who were told that we had to allow adults to hug us or touch us, even if we didn't want to, whether it was as a child or later into adulthood, could have ended up, or some of us have ended up in very difficult situations, dangerous ones that involved SA or even grape, because we were told that we can't say no. And so we need to teach kids that it's okay to say, no, I don't want to hug. No, I don't want to kiss you. No, I don't want you to touch me. Even if it's like a platonic pat on the head, no thank you, I don't want to be touched right now, is perfectly acceptable for a child to tell an adult.
It's not so much about stranger danger these days, because it's not the strangers that are hurting your kids. It's usually family members.
That part.
It's people you know.
It's people you know.
Yes, Huckleberry, kids should have the freedom to say no. Yep, that's what kids consent at all ages means. Thank you, Huckleberry. For the people in my comment section who think that there's something wrong with this, we should probably check their hard drive. Weird.
However,
Weird.
we are not in any way saying that a minor can give intimate time consent.
And by the way, this headline, there's nothing wrong with this headline because like you could literally Google those words and it's going to tell you how to teach your kids about bodily autonomy and consent. It is those of you who immediately think that consent means sex that have the problem.
I'm wondering if people are speed reading it and they're misreading it when they do. That says teach kids consent at all ages. It does not mean kids can consent at all ages.
What's actually happening, Ms. Diesel, is that they're seeing, they might be speed reading, but most likely what it is they're seeing teach kids consent at all ages, and then my pronouns are they, them, and because they're transphobic, they assume that because I'm non-binary that I am a predator. That's what's actually happening.
Right.
They're just literally telling on themselves immediately.
Yeah.
Kelsey just explained kindergarten consent. Kelsey did give a great example of kindergarten consent where when she was teaching, they had 3 options for each kid, a hug, a big high five, or a wave. And the kid could pick which they would want to do every morning in the beginning of class, a hug, high five, or wave. That is teaching a kid bodily autonomy and consent. And why would you not want your children to understand what consent is? Those children are growing into adults. And we need our adults, statistically speaking, men, to understand what consent is. Bird Dog, I don't care about when you felt it was appropriate. It is transphobia.
I taught age appropriate sex education to my children, starting at the age of 5.
Yeah.
But it was
Huckleberry,
age appropriate.
It is.
Huckleberry, it's literally transphobia. What you're saying is transphobia. People think that because my pronouns are in my background that I'm pushing sexuality on kids. That's transphobia, literally. I don't know why that would be hard to understand. Assuming that someone who is non-binary wants to groom children is literally transphobia.
Exactly.
Oh, I bet you are, Bird Dog. I bet you are. Anyway, as we were saying, we were talking about teaching kids to say no. Whoa, that is big red flag. Holy
Jesus
shit. To teach them to say no, teaches them they have the right to say yes. They don't.
Wow. No, it teaches them that they have the right to say no. That's what it teaches. It teaches them when they don't like something, they have the right to say no.
They do.
I am very, that is wild. At what age do you teach a child that they have the right to say no? As soon as they learn to be able to use sign language, immediately. As we've discovered, not just when they talk. Redneck VR wants to murder me. That's cute.
Oh, that's cute.
So teaching children that they have the right to say no when someone wants to give them a hug means that I deserve to be unalived, according to Redneck VR, which just means that Redneck VR is a literal P3DO. Thank you for outing yourself, for self-identifying.
Oh, baby.
I don't force my children to eat food. I set a plate down in front of them. I will ask them to at least try everything on the plate, but if they don't like it, they don't have to eat it.
Yeah, Diesel, that's what I was going to say. Like I had that experience as a child where I grew up, you know, with grandparents of the depression where you ate everything on your plate and you were sometimes forced to overeat and would
Oh
often
yeah.
make me sick and would often, you know, lead to absences at schools, things like that, because I didn't have the ability to say no, I'm full, I'd be excused.
Um, and and for the adults in this room that are saying, like, you teach kids they shouldn't be touched in some places, that's simple. They shouldn't be touched in certain places. Yes, but also, in order for children to understand bodily autonomy in certain places, they also have to understand that physical touch without consent isn't okay. Whether that's just as simple as a hug or a kiss on the cheek. If the child doesn't want to be touched and they say no, then you respect that. We're not even, like, when we talk about teaching kids consent, we're talking about teaching them bodily autonomy overall. Yeah, I think your microphone was covered, Anna. Anna was talking about someone said, like, kids can say no to eating their vegetables. It is, like, well known that forcing children to eat when they are not hungry causes a lot of issues with um, their ability to know when they're full,
Yes.
and then they end up overeating because they're told to ignore their body. Gary, it's not just strangers that are the problem. Most children are essayed or raped by someone that they know.
Yes. Not by a stranger.
I hated him too, Renee.
I want to clarify language there. Most children that are victims of SA, not most children.
Sorry. And, like, but you're assuming that consent means consent to sex, and it doesn't. Children have the ability to consent to whether or not they want to hug. Like, they do. Just because it says consent, it doesn't mean sex.
Bird Dog, I have 5 children. So if you want to come up in the box and talk.
I have 4.
I have parented 5 children. I did not give birth to them, but I have still raised them.
No comment.
I don't understand. First of all, some people are child psychologists, teachers, pediatricians who don't have children. Like, people like that do exist. So whether or not someone has given birth to a child really doesn't mean that they don't understand what they're talking about.
I've seen people that are more affectionate with their pets than they are with their children and would make better parents because they're good pet parents than some parents who birth children.
I think that was a reply to someone else, other Jen. My bestie Jen. Children do get choices to some extent. Yes, they should.
So, something you just said kind of reminded me. I was an EMT like a decade ago. I became an EMT in 2010. And I'm recalling now, there's like full chapters in the EMT like manual or like the whole course where it specifically teaches you like how to interact with kids so that you have their consent without scaring them. You know, because, like, I mean, no kid likes to get poked with a needle, but, like, sometimes you need to take blood sugar, you know, and they teach us things like, you know, not to tell a kid you're going to take their blood pressure, but rather say things like you're going to test their blood pressure. That way they don't think you're taking something from them. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's, like, all this research goes into just, you know, how specifically to best interact with kids in a way that respects their autonomy, but it still allows you to do your job.
K-Dog, I actually agree with you. It's for the child to decide whether or not they want something like as simple as a hug. This is wild to me. Well, then I guess you would if you said that you don't give consent to have your blood tested, guess what? Nobody would test your blood.
That's right.
Precisely.
You have to consent to medical treatment. Like adults have to consent to medical treatment.
Right.
I was talking about blood pressure.
Yeah, but
Wow.
Either way, though.
I'm pretty sure that that's actually a law. If the child voices that they don't want to give blood, they don't have to, and the parent cannot override that decision.
So one of the reasons, there's a couple of reasons why we're talking about this topic, and that is because, as we can see in this comment section, many adults on this app do not understand consent, be it consent when it comes to sex, or just consent overall, like consent of like being in people's spaces when they're not welcome, or sharing information that they didn't have permission to share. Like they just adults don't understand consent, much like this comment section. One of the reasons that we need to teach kids about consent at all ages is so that when they become an adult,
yes,
we don't have this problem.
Exactly. Or while they're a child. That if you teach them consent in all aspects, and that no one, and you also reinforce that consent conversation with the conversation of no one is allowed to touch you in these areas, that makes it so that if that does happen, they will tell somebody.
It's literally blowing my mind that we have to keep explaining this over and over again. It is really problematic that this has to be explained over and over again.
Jeremy just said, people like you stay away from my kids or they'll meet their maker. When you say people like me, what do you mean?
Let's get that, guys. Let me see Jeremy here. Okay, let's get Jeremy's information. Let's go to Jeremy's page.
Okay, Wasted. I'm gonna tell you a little something. Okay, in the medical field, there are two things. There are two forms of consent. Okay, there is informed consent and there is implied consent. Okay, now as an EMT, if I'm treating a kid, one of two situations is going on. Either I'm doing it under the informed consent of the parents, or I'm doing it under the implied consent if the parents aren't there. Okay, but when you suggested that what if my medical intervention unalives them, yeah, we're talking about taking a blood pressure and maybe checking their blood sugar. Okay, these aren't life-threatening tests.
They also have the medical professionals also have taken an oath to do no harm. Mm-hmm. So that kind of overrides. Like if there is a life-threatening situation, then they have taken an oath to do no harm, so they would have to intervene.
I think. Sorry. Go ahead, Lita.
I was going to say CH53. I'm just going to call them cheese for now. I don't know what they're supposed to be called, but still say teach kids to scream it from the rooftops if someone does something inappropriate at all. Part of the message of teaching kids consent at all ages is to know exactly where that line of inappropriateness is drawn.
Mac, I just really, I understand you're saying that you misunderstood the title, but I just really don't understand why anyone immediately thinks that this topic means that to teach consent of sex to young children. That's never going to be true. But we've been talking about teaching children that if anybody touches them and that people should not be touching them without their permission, including a hug, a kiss on the cheek, things like that.
Bird Dog says, I raise my kids the way I want. You can raise yours the way you want. Well, Bird Dog, from what I can understand from what you've been saying, you have no room to complain if your kid violates another kid's consent and sees consequences for that.
How can we expect our children to grow up in the world and not violate someone's consent, which is a terrible thing to do and probably going to end up in jail if we don't teach them what consent means at a young age? How do we prevent that from happening?
So I'm going to drop. I'm heading to bed. So it has been a fun night. It has been a great time of seeing very concerning comments from people who.
Very concerning.
Well, yeah, some of the things I can't even believe we've read tonight. But anyway, I will catch you all tomorrow, and hope you have a wonderful night. And let me know how everything else goes.
You too. I'm gonna be wrapping up the live soon anyway. But My Life as a Trucker said children have been fine, just fine until the year 2000. Good night. I would like for you to talk to anybody who was a child before the year 2000 and ask them if they were just fine.
I wasn't.
I wasn't either.
What a weird thing to say. You understand that, like, oh boy.
And this idea
weird. I don't even.
Like, I know that parents have ultimate responsibility for their children. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is, on this panel, is that we want to give them as many tools as we possibly can to help them stay safe in a world when you're not always going to be around. So teaching them to say no to adults is not a bad thing. And especially an adult that they may have some kind of. Kids have their own body languages. They have their own where they cringe, and you can see it in them, and you can feel it in them too. And so you can trust a kid to know, and teach a kid to trust their own selves with coaching, with parenting, with all those things. And it's not an easy job, and it's not a job that we get right all the time. And nobody's here condemning parents. We're just saying these are some tools that you can use in a toolbox to help your kid navigate the world in a better way. Parents screaming about, like, we're trying to take away your parenting freedoms. That's not what is going on here.
No. In fact, the information, like, because even though I understand the basics of consent and teaching kids the basic of consent, I always do some amount of research before I talk about a topic on live, just so I have official information, if you will. And everything I read about this topic, which is literally what I typed into the Google machine before I went to see, to pull up resources, talks about the importance of teaching kids consent at an early age to help them to create children who will have less rape and sexual assault SA in their life. Because if children, it's not going to eliminate it, obviously, but if children understand that touching other people or being touched without consent is not okay, what do you think would actually happen? You're protecting the child by teaching them that they have bodily autonomy, just as much as you are helping them be good people in the future. Then Mac, I would highly recommend, I teach kids consent at all ages. We can teach our children to have.
And don't forget it when you're an adult either.
And not just girls.
Boys too.
Right. Yes. Regardless of gender, the children in my family had the exact same conversations. Why would they be any different? I know they agree, but the assumption is, um, my life as a trucker. When I was a child, we would fight, and we were encouraged to fight by our parents and teachers. Okay, so you were encouraged as a child to physically assault other people. What good does that do for adults? I I do have experiences in my life, Mac. I just don't assume that teaching consent equals. I understand that you are in agreement that children should be taught to say no.
And that's good that you are, that you should be taught that boys and girls are both are special, and they should be, you should treat people the way you would want someone else to be treated. You're like someone you love to be treated. That's basically what we're talking about here.
My life as a trucker, you just said we were taught as boys that girls are special and to be treated like our mothers with respect. First of all,
no.
As a person assigned female at birth, I find it really creepy if somebody thinks that I should be treated like their mother. What? No. Okay, just think about that.
No.
Isn't that like Freud's thing? Also, you say that boys were taught that girls are special, but that's not exactly true, is it? You were taught, just like I was taught, that girls are special if they are pure.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not
Or
special.
subservient, or soft, or
yes.
soft-spoken.
Not loud, not with opinions. Dare I say the word palatable?
You were also taught that you had like the ability to have access to a girl, submissive, yep, and not consensually submissive. And that if the girl didn't meet those qualifications, then they were dehumanized. And boys were taught that they should be they would be entitled to that.
Agreeable is a good word too, Maji. We must be agreeable. We can't be disagreeable at all.
And just like as a kid, I was taught, oh well, if that boy hits you, that means he likes you. No, it means that he's abusive and he shouldn't be allowed to hit me.
Wow.
Guess what? I make my
I think
husband
Bird
say
Dog
that to me
is
because
just
I love him. Okay, get over yourself.
trolling.
Yeah, I make my husband
Bird
say
Dog
this
is
all the
trolling,
time.
but
Get over it.
when Bird Dog feels the need to announce that his wife makes his sandwiches, all that tells me is he's incapable of doing something as simple as making a sandwich.
Right, and I do that because I want to do it. I don't do it because I'm forced to do it. Crazy.
I want to go back to what I said earlier. It's important to teach not only how to give consent over stuff and bodily autonomy. It's also important to teach how to receive no.
Yes.
When you're told no, go away and leave that person alone.
Yes.
Don't
Agreed.
say they're playing hard to get. Don't say that, just try harder. No. You've received your answer.
Jen, I didn't know you had enough followers to go live. I was in my Discord being like, follow my cousin, then she can talk to us.
So one thing that I really want to share, because I work with autistic children, we do share consent, but we also share assent, which means that they're willing to interact with us. So if they're like, we don't want to interact with you, like we're not going to force that. So, they go kind of like hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I forgot about that, Margie. I forgot that it was 500 for voice only. Thank you for sharing that. Listen, I know it's not children, but I think it can apply to children because I do like
Yeah.
with my birds, it's consent, it's permission-based training. Like if my bird
Yep.
doesn't want to interact, I won't interact. They don't want it. And the same is true for children. Like we shouldn't be forcing children who seem shy because um, a lot of especially people assigned female at birth who are neurodivergent are seen as shy. Um, they might not be shy, and why do we have to force them to interact with people? I love that.
I was called withdrawn. I was never called shy. I guess that's like the upgrade of shy. I was always called withdrawn because I didn't really like interacting with anyone.
And then trying to navigate that in a world where there's so much stimulation that it becomes overwhelming. And then people are like, no, get away. Because you
Um,
feel like a bomb, at times. And the last thing you do is want to be touched at a time like that.
so my life as a trucker thinks people like us having children is scary. Because he thinks that by teaching children um, consent, consent for things like hugs or as Determined to Thrive said, interaction, that is problematic somehow.
I mean, I'm kind of glad that I made them more pro-choice.
This is wild. It really, I did not expect this reaction.
Well, I'm sorry. My children are not unruly. Like they respect their elders,
Yes.
but they also have respect. So if they don't want to do something, go talk to them. They have their own voice. I'm teaching my 12-year-old that with my parents because my mom is overbearing. She always was growing up and doesn't know the word no. So like trying like to be like, if she doesn't want to do that, that's fine. My kids are not unruly. I'm sorry. They're teaching how to respect themselves and respect others. And when you don't do that, then those kids are unruly. I'm sorry.
Right.
First of all, my life as a trucker, I didn't say anything about my mother. Um, what is happening? I don't respect my mother because she's got a lot of issues that I don't need to respect. Anyway, we just listened to Determined to Thrive talk about her respectful children. Do you think that teaching a child that they don't have any right over their body is teaching them disrespect? Because I don't understand.
I'm confused.
Also, the idea of like we can teach children how to respect people that are older than them without having to allow them access in ways that make them uncomfortable.
That's not true, Trucker, about your children respecting you or respecting their boundaries. Yes, they will. They will.
That's not how karma works.
That's not how that works at all. We can direct you to some karma jars if you're interested.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. Segue.
You might need one of these. Listen, if you would like. Anyway, sorry.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. Also, you know that just because a person has biologically created an offspring does not immediately mean that they have earned respect. You can't teach children to give unquestioning respect to adults. That's how they get into that's how situations happen where they're respecting adults. They don't feel like they can say no to adults. And that's not the child's fault. That is the predatory adult's fault. But why wouldn't you want them to know that they don't have to just automatically respect someone because they're older than them? Yeah. Teach kids consent at all ages. So parent kids about consent at all ages. Great.
Then why are we seeing an uprise in this topic and consent then? Why is this becoming such a pronounced thing? Because I'll tell you why, because a lot of kids are now demanding this. They're demanding, don't touch me, don't hug me. And you're seeing it from these kids because parents are teaching their kids this. And guess what? That's going to rub off on your kids too, in one way or another. It's another form of F around and find out. Just
Also,
saying.
I agree with Maji here, where he says demanding respect as a parent usually creates a resentful child
Yes.
that won't talk to you in an old age.
Yes.
But to expand on that, demanding respect out of your child is treating your child as if they're an object that you own. That is a human. You don't own it.
That's right. They're ours for a little time, and then they're the world's, unfortunately. So we got to give them the best tools that we can to live in it. They're always going to be our children. We're always going to love them. But the world's a nasty ass place. And that needs to be communicated to them and understood to them at age appropriate times.
We're literally talking about parenting a child, not friending a child.
Right.
Being a friend is not teaching them consent. Being a friend is just going with the flow. Being a parent is teaching them
Right.
that they have their own voice, their own say. Like women, we have our own right, we have our own say, and so do men. Like, and anybody else. Like, we're still teaching how to respect other people as well as themselves.
How do you parent a child to be just bouncing off of what you said, to be a respectful adult? If you want an adult human to not violate another human's consent, you have to teach them what that is, right? Like, you have to teach that to them. Why would you not teach them, hey, it's your body. If you don't want to hug, you don't have to have one. Hey, that kid didn't want to hug, don't hug them. Why wouldn't you teach them that if as an adult you don't want them to touch people just whenever they want? This concept is weird to me.
Sorry, I was not taught consent. My parents demanded respect. I was never taught of my own body, and it put me in relationships and situations where I was abused because of that, because I didn't learn that.
Right.
And I'm dealing
Yep.
with that later in life with my own kids and my husband.
And that is one of the things that, like the goal of teaching kids consent at all ages is to be able to navigate those better than we were taught.
Why do you think that that's the litmus test, Trucker? That if they survive life and have children of their own, then I was successful? Are you kidding me? Are you the King of England? Are you siring these young princes? What are you doing?
Why do you think you're owed grandchildren?
Jesus Lord, that is crazy to me.
I want my kids to be good people and good to other people, and knowing how to live on their own, but also respect themselves and others. Like, it ties all together.
Yes. I would very much like to teach the generation that's coming up, the young generations younger than me, especially because statistically speaking, the boys, that they're not entitled to anyone's body, that no means no, that girls aren't just playing hard to get, that hitting a girl doesn't mean you like them. These are the things that I want the next generation to know, because those are the things that we were taught. And it didn't turn out so great for us.
Or that don't teach your boys that chasing the girl and pulling on her hair is a form of affection.
Vincent, do you expect your children to grow up and just do exactly the same thing you did? What if your child has a completely different experience in life? What if they have a completely different gender? What if they decide to marry somebody that you're not comfortable with?
Vincent was agreeing with Jen.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, there was a
Yes.
in front of that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, stop expecting
My
grandkids.
life as a trucker. Are you from Sparta? Are you from, like, I'm confused.
Maybe I got Vincent and I'm sorry. I need to get my glasses on. This is shit. Hold on. It's
So
too dark.
Morgan, back to like the younger kids. So my 4-year-old, which we even started when he was like 2 and 3, like no meant no. And just teaching him at that age, like don't hit, especially don't hit your mom, don't hit the dog, don't hit your sister. Like we don't do that like to girls. Like he understands at his young age to not do something, and no means no. I mean, he's still a toddler, so he's going to do what he wants to, but
Impulse control.
he understands, okay, when we say no, no means no. And we'll continue that through his entire life, like to respect.
Yeah. Well, and there is a huge like this conversation I'm having now, I'm not just like off the top of my head, it's because there is a huge portion of people who are going to raise their children that way, which is fantastic, and I love that. That's what we need to do. Apparently, my life as a trucker has enough people to. No, it says I can't invite them. They might be banned. So anyway, I don't like saying that I am Sparta. I am Sparta isn't really it wasn't really funny. It was dumb. You are Sparta, therefore you are okay with like not teaching children that they have bodily autonomy. What? Weird flex. Anyhow, on that note, thank you so much for coming, Jen. I appreciate it. I'm so glad I didn't realize, I keep forgetting that they changed the rules to 500 people. So I'm glad you came and provided your insight on your experience with children with autism and parenting experience.
Not a problem.
And thank you to everyone else. I appreciate all my mods and stuff. I hope everyone has a great night.